The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Yes, coming to you cordless, everybody. It's 9 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 6 p.m. on the West Coast, 8 a.m. in Singapore, 12 noon in Sydney, Australia, and here where I'm sitting in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 8 p.m. Central Time. I am Jim Peters. Welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night. Nice to see you, folks. This is episode number 197, if you're keeping score at home, and I hope you are. And I have a little thing about this. So, we've changed our schedule here slightly. We used to do Monday through Thursday live, 4 days a week. Now we're doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 days a week. And I did that because I can't, after a year of doing this, we did almost exactly 150 shows. And I don't know if you know if you have any math in you, but that's basically 3 days a week. Now, I took some time off for surgery in June, all sorts of stuff, but I thought, okay, we're doing 3 days a week. Let's just commit to 3 days a week. And I thought of doing that previously, except the problem was which 3 days of the week. And Monday, Wednesday, and Friday were the obvious ones. But the reason I wasn't doing Friday previously is because I wanted Friday nights off for a 3-day weekend. And I finally came to the conclusion, I'm old and no one wants to see me. So why not just get on the inner tube, So now I'm doing Fridays. And it's Friday tonight, and it's phone-in Friday. So that means you call in. We have a brand new phone number. Well, it's new as of about 10 days ago. 325 call Jim. That's 325-225-5546. So I hope you call in tonight. You can talk about anything you want, any subject. It's open phones. I'm going to prattle on until one of you do. So I got plenty to talk about as usual. But so that's what we got going on here too. Next Friday is going to be our 200th show, and I'm trying to arrange for some big time guests, that sort of thing. We'll see. I had a guy wanted to come on, can't do it. So that's unfortunate, but so that's now 200 shows on Friday. Yeah. So Anna, and this coming week, I've talked about this previously. We have a new producer joining the show. Stephen Sullivan is going to be joining us, and I'm hoping I can talk him into. I have apparently basically talked him into he coming on live with me one night a week at least. So, but I'm going to try pretty hard to get him on next Friday. I still haven't talked to him yet. I don't know if he can. But so that's what we got. We got it going on, Okay, boomer. All right. So what's going on? Breaking news. If you haven't heard, there was another plane crash in Philadelphia in a neighborhood. And I had heard previously that it was a small plane, but it was a Lear jet. So I don't know if that actually qualifies as a small plane. I'd say maybe like large, small, or something like that. The plane that went into the Potomac in Washington, D.C., was a regional jet air carrier, and I think it was a Bombardier. I think it held 60 passengers, and it was full. I want to talk about this for a second because I have an opinion here that I don't know if many of you share this with me or not, and it doesn't have to do with the plane crash. The plane crash, they're both horrific. I assume there were only 6 people on this Lear jet that crashed, and I assume they all lost their lives because there's a huge fire in this neighborhood. This crashed in a residential neighborhood of Philadelphia. So, and I don't, there's just horror, such sad stories coming out about the people who were on the DC flight. About one woman caught an early flight to be there for her boyfriend's birthday. Of course, she never made it. Stuff like that. It's terrible, and that's the thing. I don't want to denigrate the tragedy at all. I don't. My problems with the news media. So I want to run this by you. If that crash in D.C. had happened over the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport here in the middle of flyover country in the cold frozen north, I doubt it would have barely made a blip on the national news, and that's what kinda bothers me. Not so much that that wouldn't have happened, but because it was in DC, it did. Matter of fact, this completely overwhelmed the news coverage for about 15 hours. Now, I don't know about you, but I work late, so I generally don't start my workday till 1 o'clock, and I take mornings off because 'cause I'm a wreck in the morning, so I'm up a lot, especially in the middle of the night. Sometimes I will get up from sleeping, I'll just turn the TV on for a while. This happened about 2 a.m. local time, if I'm right, in DC, and was completely Fox News with wall-to-wall pictures, and they didn't have any pictures because basically they missed the crash. It's the old joke. I mean, I don't want to joke about this, but it's the old joke Ron White had about he's sitting on an airplane and they're going down. He said the guy next to him is going nuts, and he said, "Well, that guy must have had a lot to live for." And somebody says, "Well, what do you think's going to happen?" He said, "I think we'll just make it to the crash site. I think we'll beat the paramedics." Is what he said. Okay, I'm laughing about this, and I shouldn't. It's awful. But my point is, I don't know if this would have gotten this much news coverage if it hadn't happened in Washington, D.C. And I don't know what that says about us or the media either. Yeah, it's terrible. As plane crashes go, I mean, not to get clinical about it, but it wasn't that many people, 67 people total. It was not a large plane. And the other thing is too, and I've talked about this many times, I talk about this in terms of the UFO thing. So we lose right now one airplane every 2 years. This is all entirely within the United States. I don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. I don't keep track of those statistics. In the United States, we lose one commercial airliner every 2 years. You have to understand there's 25,000 commercial flights every day. Every day. There's 10 million flights in the United States every year. And I don't like, for example, I don't think the Learjet even qualifies for that. It doesn't. I'm talking about commercial flights where you, the public, can buy a ticket. There's 10 million of them every year. We lose one airplane in every 20 million flights. As a matter of fact, before the thing that happened in DC earlier this week, I think the last crash was 4 years ago. So we're actually improving on that schedule. And when you stop and think about what's going on here, it's nuts because this is really, relatively speaking, this is primitive technology that we've perfected. Like, I mean, humans do about everything. And my big example of this is phonograph records. You were literally dragging a diamond across a piece of plastic, and the sound was actually pretty damn good, and still is. There's people who still listen to LP phonograph records, and DJs still use them. And I want to point out, as a former DJ, I want to point out that the reason DJs still use them is the one thing that vi- vinyl records still trumps over, no fun pun intended, still trumps over CDs or MP3s, is that the bass reproduces better on vinyl records. Analog bass is better. The rest of it doesn't, but bass does. And if you're in a club, bass is what matters to you, and that's why a lot of DJs still use vinyl records. That's the reason. But you look at that about then the ridiculous history of phonograph records and how we perfected that. And it's the same with airplanes. Now, for all practical purposes, commercial flying hasn't changed since 1960. I mean, it's been 75 years that we've basically been doing the same thing. The engines have gotten better, the noise has gotten better, the planes have gotten infinitely better. They're way, way more fuel efficient than they used to be years ago, but still, it's still pretty much the same thing. Boeing came out with the 707 in 1959, excuse me, and yeah, we've been doing the same thing for 75 years. And we still, I mean, we've busted the speed of sound, well, technically many years ago, and even commercially, the Concorde flew in the 70s, and now there's several companies who say that they are going to reinstate supersonic aircraft flying. And that's coming up soon because apparently we've learned pretty much now how to almost completely negate the sonic boom, not quite, but good enough so they can pass. Because that was a complaint about supersonic air travel, which is the reason it only happened between New York and London because it was over the ocean. That's the reason. There was no way to bother. So I bring that up because, yeah, we're pushing a giant piece of steel through the air at 600 miles an hour. The fact that we get this down to the point that we only fail once every 20 million tries is actually it's nuts. I can't even wrap my mind around it. I can't. I mean, you tell me anything that has a 20 million plus success ratio. I can't think of anything. You know, you are literally more likely to get hit by a car walking out to your mailbox in your front yard than you are flying from New York to LA. I mean, statistically, it's not even close. You know, and so when this happens now, it's a tragedy because it happens so seldom. But my point is how this completely dominated the news cycle for like 2 days, and I don't know if it I don't I'll be honest, I don't know if it warranted that, you know, if you unless, you know, it's like, you know, it's a curiosity and it's a tragedy, and I hate to get back to the whole thing about, in the news, if it bleeds, it leads, you know, but that's basically still true, and then you talk about a slow news day, but the weird thing is we haven't had many slow news days in the last week. We haven't. So, I mean, what happened with at Fox News, I can't remember whether this was Tuesday night, was it? That finally at 9 AM when Kash Patel went above Congress, they finally cut away from the airplane stuff. They finally did. And so I suppose, okay, now you got other news, you know? But I don't know. I'm afraid that you folks are gonna say I'm cold-hearted. I would say that's not true, but still, I think this is a concern, and I don't think. And then people wonder why people don't trust the news business. I mean, I don't have to tell you this. The not just the ratings, but the polls indicate that the public is really soured on professional journalism. They just have. And you wonder why. You know, it's like, well, now you're telling me something. Okay, this is interesting, but doesn't really affect my life. Really, am I going to not get an air? I'll tell you, if you don't fly because of this, you're nuts. Like I said, 20 million times previously it worked. Well, actually, if you're going to go technically, if it's 4 years, it'd be 40 million times. So, I mean, the chances of you dying in an airplane crash are so slim, it's mind boggling. I mean, I mean, seriously, you could step on a rake in your backyard and have it hit you in the head and be more likely to get killed from that than flying an airplane. That's how ridiculous we've gotten. Now, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but um how does this relate to the UFO stuff? Well, people have said, here's the deal. And I guess I'm just gonna get ahead of myself. I have this on the rundown for tonight, but I'm just gonna get ahead of myself anyway. There's a documentary coming out in March. There were 34 government officials. These are not laymen. These are people either in the military or in the U.S. government have come in this documentary. This guy named Diane Fahar got these people to come out on camera and said, yeah, they know the UFO stuff's real. And many of them said they've seen the bodies and they've seen this crashed aircraft. And the contention of the people in this documentary is that the reason or one of the primary reasons that the government has not released this to the public is because the people in this documentary state that we have been in a Cold War race to reverse engineer this technology that we have uncovered. And basically, like someone said, and of course it's really true, whoever wins this race basically owns all the marbles. So if the Chinese beat us to it, we're screwed. And we are. There's just no doubt about that. Because this is going to the advancement in physics and science and the military application of this is going to be so enormous that basically whoever figures this out first is going to rule the planet. And there's no doubt about that. And that's the reason they say this has been kept so uncovered. But the reason I brought this up around the airplane thing is people say, well, how could these things crash? You flew all the way across the galaxy, and I mean, Zeta Reticuli is 37 light years away from Earth, and supposedly that's where a lot of these people live. Uh, and then you crash coming into the atmosphere, and people think, well, that's so stupid. But actually, here's the deal: there's two reasons it isn't. First of all, supposedly people who've been abducted have told them that the aliens have told the abductors that the reason these spacecraft have crashed is because our radar interferes with their with their navigation systems. And you're thinking, well, that's so stupid because we have such primitive technology. But ladies and germs, that's the actual reason. If you're on Zeta Reticuli and you're 500,000 years ahead of us, it's never occurred to you that we're going to run into freaking radar. You haven't seen radar in 50,000 years. So why would you think so? No, radar could totally screw up your navigation system because you aren't prepared for it because you haven't seen radar in ages. It's in the dustbin of history for you. So that's one reason. And the second reason is the fact that, and I've said this before, I don't think everyone in this documentary that's coming out, the documentary is called Above Top. I think it's called Above Top Disclosure. I think it's called. I'm going to play you a trailer later on. I have the trailer for it. But everybody in this documentary states that the ETs have been coming here for ages, and we know this, and they have been. I mean, every piece of evidence I've seen seems to indicate that. But the thing is, if you're coming here for ages, that means you're coming here a lot. And I don't think people realize how many of these damn stupid ET spacecraft are flying around in our atmosphere. I don't think they understand it. Case in point, I've said this before. The real people who seem to see this on almost a daily basis are local TV news crews, and they're not looking for it. They go out, if you're in Albuquerque and your local ABC affiliate goes out to film the Renaissance Festival or whatever the hell you got going on, they're setting up their gear, and somebody leaves the camera on a tripod, and the camera's end up pointing straight up to the sky, and they go back to the studio to edit this footage, and all of a sudden they see this stuff. Like, what's that? And apparently, from what I understand, there's like 300 network TV affiliates in the United States, that among the 300 of them, they see this almost every day. They're constantly seeing these stupid unidentified flying objects. Now, I'm sure not all of them are ET spacecraft. Matter of fact, probably most of them aren't. But still, they see enough of them so that you got to think. My theory here is, and people there, I'm not the only person who said this or thought of this, was that we think that flying across the galaxy to get here is very rare. My contention is very commonplace. That's my contention. So when you get that many spacecraft flying around, and you talking about the fact that our stupid radio radar screws up your navigation system, at that point, yeah, you're going to lose spacecraft. And so, they're probably losing. It looks like right now they're probably losing maybe one out of every 5 years. I have no idea. I've been told that I'm low on this. I don't know if that's true, but you look back to everyone talks about Roswell, but the first real documented crash of an ET spacecraft is Cape Girardeau, Missouri in 1941. And then you can also even go back to 1896 in Aurora, Texas. There's that too. Where they said in their cemetery, they actually have a little green man buried. And that's the real weird thing about that. People who were there, there's big contention whether this really happened. But there are people, and of course they're all dead now, but about 20 years ago they weren't. You had some people who were little kids then who were still alive that contended, no, this really did happen. Supposedly the spacecraft hit a windmill of all things and crashed, and the lone occupant died, and they buried him in the local cemetery with last rites. And they actually had his grave marked until people kept stealing the marker, and now they don't have one anymore. And the other thing is too, it looks like was it UFO Hunters or some weird television one of these UFO television shows actually went there and asked to dig up this body. And the local cemetery association said no, they refused. But they did do a ground radar penetration test. And they said, yeah, there's a body in there and it's pretty small. That's what they said. Now, and this was, I think, in like 2009 or something like that. I'm pulling this stuff out of my butt, folks, so I don't really know. But at any rate, several years later, they or someone else went back to the cemetery association, I think the cemetery is owned by the city of Aurora, Texas, and asked if they could dig up the body, and they said no again. But they went back to that gravesite and did another ground radar test, and nothing came up. It looks like that body has been moved or removed. So I don't, but that isn't very well documented. But the one in Cape Girardeau, Missouri in 1941 was. So you go back, what's that, about 80, 85 years? I don't know. We've probably recovered maybe a dozen of these things. I mean, I've always said at least six, probably nine or more. That's what I've always contended. So they're not losing a lot of them. But to lose that many, like if you're going to compare that to our stupid thing about flying through the air by pushing stuff off of steel wings, that's a relatively high percentage of failure. And you'd think that, well, you'd think after 50,000 years you wouldn't fail at this, but no, you run in our stupid radar, which, like I said, which you haven't seen in 50,000 years, and then you're wondering, well, why the hell is this screwing us up? Precisely because it's so primitive. That's the reason. And that's so anyway. I'm getting back. I'm kind of getting off. I didn't want to go into that per se, but I'm kind of getting off on the point here. The point is, I don't know if this hadn't happened in DC, if this would have made the news cycle to the extent it was. It did, and I don't know if that's right because the problem with our news media folks is that they're so locally centric. I don't have to tell you this. You know this. If it happens in New York, L.A., or Washington D.C., it's all over the news. If it happens, even in Chicago, if it happens, nah, maybe not. That's flyover country. Screw it. So anyway, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And like I said, I didn't want to bring this up because I was afraid. I am afraid that I will look like a cold hearted bastard. And I may be a bastard, but I'm not cold hearted. Okay. Uh, so Trump has offered federal workers in certain agencies in the United States uh, buyouts for their employment. In other words, the idea right now is that if you quit right now, we will give you 8 months of severance pay. That's the idea, and also there's a couple other perks that go along with that too. It's actually a relatively attractive uh, package, and of course, people in the bureaucracy in the United States government, they're losing their minds because, well, first, and this is the I just think this is so stupid. It's mind-boggling. But I guess I don't know. If you work in government now, see, I look at this from a completely point of view. I've been fired at least a dozen times. I've had the most unstable work history of probably anybody you know. And guess what? I survived it just fine. So I have a hard time with people who bitch and moan about this. I mean, I have good friends of mine who had the same job for like 30 years, you know. And I don't, and so I can't relate to this. The longest job I ever had was 9 years, and I've had two for like 5 years, and that's about it. And I'm old. So when these people bitch about the fact they might get fired, oh boo hoo hoo, I'm crying, crocodile tears. That's what I'm doing. And now they've been offered this buyout. Now the real amazing thing is, and I can let me check who. Oh, this was John Sutton on in Hot Air, and he wrote about the fact that a lot of the federal employees don't believe they don't take the Trump administration at their word. They think that if they if they agree to this, they won't actually get the money. That's what they actually think. And then the other thing, and that's absurd. No, they couldn't get away. The government could not get away with that. But one thing they could definitely get away with, and which was also occurred to a lot of these people, if they don't take the buyout, there's a possibility that they might be summarily fired without any warning whatsoever and no severance. And that's true. You're being offered a severance. So you think, well, geez, should I take this? Well, there's a good, and then there's people who think they're going to fight this. Their union's going to fight it. And this is the problem, folks. Our government has become so bloated and no one wants to do anything. Everybody fights it because it's a giant, giant gravy train and you're paying for it. Can I say that? Can I emphasize that enough? You're paying for the gravy train of all these people who aren't even necessary. There's 4 million non-military employees of the United States government. 4 million. I contend that the government could probably run really fine with just 250,000 of them, or 5% of that total. I don't think you would need much more than people than that. That's how ridiculous this has gotten. Now, and you're thinking, well, what is my expertise? Well, I've run a few companies. I have, and it's like the bloat is unbelievable, and usually it's from middle management people who equate the number of employees under them with their power, which may or may not be true. Sometimes it's just an ego thing. Sometimes there's actually something to it. But yeah, I actually do think the federal government could run just fine on a 250,000 people. I really do. And there's 4 million. So, it's like you could do the math. That's about 5-7%. So these people, they don't believe the Trump administration. They believe they're going to get fired. That's the thing, but they don't believe they'll get the money. I think this is absolutely hilarious. It's just hilarious. How stupid are you? Well, you're pretty stupid. That's the problem. You're pretty damn stupid. Take the money and run. That's what I say. Because yeah, you will probably eventually get fired. And people say, well, they can't do that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I I bet between Trump and Elon Musk, who is the richest person in the world for a reason, he's really, really smart. They will figure out a way to do this. They will, because they have to. Because first of all, it's their mandate. People are totally uh, tired of this stuff. And I'm segueing here. There was a candidates convention for the Democratic National Convention Committee is looking for a new leader. So they had, I can't remember. I think this happened in Washington. I'm not sure. They had a panel discussion at some hotel or somewhere with I think a dozen candidates, and they invited the public, and the entire meeting got completely off the rails. And that's not even my contention here. They're Democrats that use that very term, off the rails. One guy tweeted, he said, if this is our future, we're cooked. That was the exact quote. And he's right. So, first of all the protesters come in. You got the climate change protesters, you got the anti Israeli, the Gaza protesters. They're all in there and they're disrupting the proceedings. And they don't know how to proceed. They literally don't know how to proceed with the forum. They don't. So it was nuts. And secondly, from the answers from the people in the forum, it's plainly obvious they haven't learned a goddamn thing from the election. They just haven't figured this out. Now, I'm going to give you a statistic, and I think I mentioned this on Monday, because this is really important. So, I can never pronounce this right. Quinnipiac did a poll, and they're a left-leaning poll organization too. You got to keep that in mind. They did a poll on Monday. This is only like 5 days old. They asked people, what do you think about deportations? And this is what the public said. I think 38% of people said they were okay with all illegal aliens being deported. 35% of people said they were at least okay with at least the criminals being deported. But here's the kicker. Only 6% of people, 6% of the respondents were okay with they didn't want anybody deported. 6%. Well, 6% is zero. I've said this, at any poll of the American public, anything over 85% is 100%. It basically is. You poll people, do you like chocolate chip cookies? 86% of people say yes. So that means that everybody likes chocolate chip cookies. Yeah, you'll find a few stragglers. You will. But it's the same thing here. 6% of the public said they wanted no deportations. And the Democratic Party still running with this fact of fighting all deportations. Well, geez, you think if you're going against what the public wants, do you think people are going to vote for you? I mean, there are people, Republicans, who saw this DNC candidates forum and were just ecstatic because they said if they keep doing this, they're never going to win an election ever, and that's true. They aren't. And who was it? I was reading, some columnist wrote an article a couple days ago, and he's saying that if the Democrats are really smart, they would just concede about the fact that there's certain things the Democrats are doing or the Republicans are doing or want to do that are just plain right, and maybe at least if not support them, not get in their way. And that's true. That's exactly how you would handle this. You'd figure out what you would feel strongly about, and then what you think is the public wants and or you think is generally morally right, and just like go along. But no, they're not going to do that. They're going to fight it every step of the way. JB Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, says he is not going to allow uh, the ICE to come into Illinois and arrest and deport people. And the answer that Christy Nome has given to that, and Tom Homan as well, then we will come into Illinois and arrest J.B. Pixler. And they can, because he's literally defying federal law. They actually could arrest the governor. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if they start doing this stuff. It wouldn't. What like, who are you're protecting criminals, that's great, that's terrific, you just go right ahead and keep on doing that. Like, oh my god. I just like, what is wrong with these people? And, I was actually thinking about that. Here's what's wrong with these people. The problem is the Biden administration came in 4 years ago and said, "Well, the adults are finally back in the room, finally in charge." That was a complete utter lie. They are not the adults, they're the kids. And the reason they're the kids is because most of these progressives are basically young and basically just out of college, and we let our colleges infiltrate their minds and indoctrinate them with bullshit. That's what's happened. William Ayers, the Weather Underground guy, who's actually a good friend of Barack Obama's, regardless if he denies it, because I think he actually got married in William Ayers' backyard or something like that. Something like that. Anyway, they have been good buddies for like 40 years. And Ayers said, and Ayers did time for I think it was for blowing up something. Well, they were basically Weather Underground was the Antifa of their time. That's what they were. And this is like in the 1970s. And Ayers did time for that. Now he's a college professor. Of course he is. And he said, "You have to understand here, we're going to win this war by indoctrinating your kids." This is like in 1978 or something. He said that, and he was right. And no one took him seriously. And God bless him, he was absolutely right about that. That's what's happened. So now you're dealing with a bunch of young people who don't seem to have any grounding in reality whatsoever. Now, are all young people stupid? Yes, they are. Was I stupid? Yes. Was my generation stupid? Very. As a matter of fact, I could, if you want to say something bad about the boomers, I could make an argument that we've been on the whole, I'm not talking about all of us, of course, on the whole, that we've been very bad parents. We basically screwed this up. And I don't know if that contributes to this or not. Probably, it probably does. But colleges have quit teaching students how to think. Now it's like you were taught what to think. And so you talk about the Biden administration and all these younger people in there. Oh God, yeah, yeah, gays for Gaza, all that sort of stuff, blah. And it has no bearing on reality whatsoever. And so they said, well, you don't understand. We can force the public to take our point of view. No, you can't. You can't, and that's why the Republicans won, and that's why you're gonna lose again unless you change. Now, I predicted this like 2 years ago, but I especially stuck with it since the election. I think we're in the throes of a generational shift in politically. I think the conservatives, the Republicans are gonna dominate now for the next 20, 30 years, just the way the Democrats did after the World War II. There's a basically between I don't know how far you go back, but between the end of FDR's term, which was like 47, if I'm right, and until Newt Gingrich won the speakership of the House in 1992, the Democrats dominated that entire time. What's that, 45 years? And I think the same thing is going to happen to the Republicans now because these people are so stupid and they can't seem to think out of their bubble. They can't seem to think that they can't come to terms that they're wrong, and most especially, they can't come to terms with the fact they think they can convince the public of anything, and they partly think that because they've been aligned with the mainstream, the legacy media for a zillion years. And now the mainstream media has lost its not only its luster, they've lost their effectiveness, they've lost their influence. I don't have to tell you this. Nobody's watching CNN. Like 300,000 people every night. Now, and I've said this before, you have to understand anything in cable television under 1 million people is considered nothing. And they're at 300,000. Meanwhile, Fox News has 6 times their audience, 6 times since the election, or even before, or even during the campaign. um, CNN and MSNBC have lost viewers, and Fox News has apparently gained those same viewers. It's a hilarious game. It's fascinating, and I would say it's also partly it's a lot of incompetence. Besides the ideology of those organizations, there's just the fact that the the presentation skills of the on-air personalities are just plain bad. There's that too. And CNN does not seem to want to they can't seem to fire anybody. Now they pretty much fired Jim Acosta by relegating him to the midnight time slot, and he refused to do that, so he left. So I don't know if that counts as a firing or not. But I mean, they're basically keep rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. They don't seem to ever, what needs to happen. This would be really dramatic, and the shareholders are probably pissed about it. But what needs to happen is they literally need to shut the whole network down for a week and completely change all the on-air personalities. Totally get rid of everybody. I don't think there's a single person there worth keeping. I can't think of who it is. You know, uh, but that's not going to happen. It's like trying to fix an airplane in midair. That's what it is. You got to keep going, and yet you got severe problems. And I don't mean that. That's no pun intended with the recent tragedies either. It's just that's what you got going on. So the Democratic Party, and all right, there's other surveys too that have happened in the last couple weeks. John Nolte wrote about this on Breitbart about the fact that the popularity of the Democratic Party has hit an all time low. It's basically it's the lowest it's been since 1992 when they started keeping excuse me when they started keeping statistics about this. These people are seriously screwed. I mean, I don't know what's gonna happen here. And, you may think, "Oh, Jim, I'm a lib hater." All no, 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 I'm not. I'm not. The republic needs 2 strong parties to, to battle each other out because here's the deal. Democracy is a wonderful thing. It's also really messy and really slow. It's supposed to be. So the best type of, government is benevolent dictatorship. There's no doubt about that because it's easy, it's quick, you can turn on a dime. It's I mean, that's what the Chinese have going for them. I don't think theirs is benevolent, and that's the problem with dictatorship. You hardly ever get a benevolent one, and even if it starts out benevolent, it usually ends up malevolent. The example everyone always uses, which is close to my heart because my family's from there, is Marshal Tito of Yugoslavia, basically from 1940s to 1990s, and he was a benevolent dictator, and the public loved him, and he treated that country very well. And my family's from there. That's why I know about this. But also, I mean, you look at history books, that's always the example given of benevolent dictatorship, but it hardly ever happens. What's going on in China, I wouldn't call benevolent dictatorship at all. It's a dictatorship, all right. I wouldn't call it benevolent. But the thing is, they do have an example or an advantage on us in the fact that because it's a dictatorship, they can turn on a dime very quickly. If something's going wrong, they can fix it very fast, and that's our problem even with China in general regarding AI, regarding this whole UFO research thing I was talking about. Is the fact is they're not as creative as us, and they're not as innovative, but they don't have to plow through process. And in that sense, they do have, and that's also the reason they think they're going to ultimately rule the world, is they think that's their advantage, and it is their advantage. But they got a problem with the fact too that there's no innovation going on in that country because of the way their infrastructure is set up. Basically, do not have free reign of thought, and you need free because everything is. I mean, hell, everything is invented in the world by some guy daydreaming or screwing around or making a mistake. Case in point, I just thought of this, and I don't know if you know where your microwave came from, but the military was trying to develop. I can't remember. This is Bell Labs. I really can't remember. Was trying to develop a certain microwave weapon, and some guy walked across the beam with a chocolate bar in his pocket, his breast pocket, and it melted. And then somebody realized, oh, this stuff heats stuff up. And now you for $200 you can get a microwave for your kitchen. That's how that happened. So, and that's not the only thing. I mean, you can go through constant examples of innovation happening by accident, but you need freedom for stuff to happen that by accident. If you don't have freedom, it's not going to happen. And they don't have it. And they don't invent anything. They've been ripping us off for like at least 50, 70 years, you know? If you go to China, you can buy a copy of Windows 11 on the street on a CD for $5. Why? Because they busted it. They stole it. That's why. So I don't know. You should call me up. 325 225 5546. That's 325 225 5546. We're going to run a commercial right now. I didn't. I'm completely off. I'm off the rails. What am I talking about? Here we go. Okay. I don't know if you've heard this. This is one of those things that did not make the news uh, much. And I don't know if that was because of the airliner stuff. I don't really know. But Mike Johnson and the new Secretary of Commerce, Stephen Bessent, and Pete Hegseth, the new Secretary of Defense, were targeted in a very bizarre assassination attempt by a guy. And I don't know where the guy's from, but he came to he told police he came to Washington D.C. specifically to kill these three people, and he confessed. It was like so. Apparently, we got it from the horse's mouth, basically, and he was going to do this by planting a bomb. That's what he said. Although he had all sorts of backup stuff. Now it turned out, and this got lost in the news even more, and this may be the reason the news um, uh, buried this. This guy's a transgender individual. David Strom, our friend over at Hot Air, he wrote about this either yesterday or today about the fact that there seems to be a very small but very militant and active, he calls it Transtifa, group of transgender people who militantly want to oppose the current administration because they think they're being oppressed. Now, well, they're not being oppressed, but of course, uh, the president signed an executive order a few days ago banning trans people from the military. And the reason it's very practical. He said, because if you're going through hormonal treatments or that sort of thing, and that can take up to a year, and it's taking up time where you'd be actually like actively working in the military. And he's absolutely right. Not to mention the fact that they alluded to this in the executive order about the fact that the majority of people who say they're transgender are actually mentally ill. I've said this on this program before. Transgenderism is real, but very, very few people have that malady. Very few. The majority of people who think they have it are emotionally disturbed. And so there's that too. But Strom talks about the fact that there does seem to be a small number of people in the trans community who are willing and able to commit violence to promote their agenda. And that's a great way. That's a terrific way of selling to the public. That's fantastic. And the amazing thing is, uh, the white supremacist thing was being touted by Biden personally and his administration and the legacy news media for like 4 years, and there's basically nothing to that. Uh, Bill O'Reilly, my boyfriend over at No Spin News, he said he put his staff on this. I don't have staff to put on it, but he did. He said, and I think it was for 2023, if I'm right. It was the last year statistics were available. How many people in the United States have been arrested for white supremacist terrorist crimes. And on all levels, local, state, federal, it was 106 over the course of an entire year. Now, there were thousands of people involved in 2020 in the riots of 20 major U.S. cities, thousands, and 106 white supremacists. And I've been saying that forever too. It's like at, it's not that it isn't real. You're talking about such a small number of people, it doesn't matter. Now, you're also talking about such a small number of transgender individuals here. That's true too. But the thing is, it depends how militant they are. If they're willing to go around and blow shit up, I mean, we got a problem, you know. And the thing is, this is a nuanced argument, and people in America, especially the mainstream media, is not used to nuanced arguments. So I don't have any trouble with transgender people per se. You want to put on a dress and go apply for a job, God bless you. You know, that's fine. You know, you do what you live your life. But I don't think you should be in women's sports at all. Matter of fact, I think that's emotional sickness. I think the fact that you want to be an emotional in a woman's sports as a transgender woman, I think is kind of nuts. And also, and I don't think you should be in the military. I don't, because for the aforementioned reasons, your life is too complex to be able to simply serve in a military function. That's what I think. And especially, and there should be, I do think there should be exceptions to regular civil law in the military, because their entire reason for being, the entire reason for the military being, is to kill people. And people don't like it when I'm that blunt about that, or when people are that blunt about it, but it is. The purpose of the military is to kill people. That's the purpose. So, uh, but other than that, and you'll say, well, no, then I don't have civil rights. Well, I don't know. Maybe you don't. You know, it's like if you carve out those two exceptions, if you think that you don't have civil rights, then maybe you don't. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But the thing is, you know, it's not an all or nothing thing, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. So a guy named Jinx Monsoon, I'm not familiar with this guy. He's a drag queen, uh, a star on UPaul's Drag Race, and he has predicted that the public is going to revolt against this ban Trump administration has made on trans people in the military, and he doesn't understand. Nobody cares. There's so few people involved here that nobody cares. And also, I think a lot of people actually do agree with Trump's point of view, as I do, and that is, your life is too complex to be uh, working in basically a lethal fashion. Nobody cares. I mean, it's astonishing how people seem to think. I don't know where, and I hate to say this, but it's mostly liberals, where got the idea that people care about all these issues they just don't care about, like the deportations. You know, uh, how do you? Um, no one cares. Like I said, only 6% of the American public thinks there shouldn't be any deportations. You know, you've completely read the room wrong. And of course, I can make the argument that's also the problem with the entire election. They were completely read the room wrong. Um, Kamala Harris was a terrible candidate. So there's that too. And she read the room wrong. She has no ability. I don't think she has any real formidable political skills or intellectual skills. And so, I think she demonstrated that. But you read the room wrong. They were astonished that they lost. Tim Walz is on with Rachel Maddow. What was that, like Monday or something like that? And he said, and he's a governor of the state I'm in, and he did a. I was talking about this on Monday. He did his first interview after losing the election with a local television outlet here, KSCP. But he did his first national one with Rachel on Monday, and he said he was astonished they lost. He was shocked, and I don't understand how you could be shocked. I predicted this almost perfectly, and Tyrus Smash on Gutfeld did, and my friend Mark Tapscott with the Epoch Times, he did too. We predicted this almost down to the only single thing I was wrong about was the fact that I thought Harris was going to win Arizona. I really did. I was surprised that she didn't. That was it. I was right about everything else. I got the electoral count within 10. So, I don't know Why are they surprised? Because they have no idea what the public's actually thinking. That's why they're surprised. So, at any rate, as I said, I think that we are in for a generational shift in politics, and I think the conservatives or the Republicans, anyway, are going to end up dominating more or less for the next probably next generation. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me already, and we're not even like a month into this, but it's already obvious to me that either J.D. Vance or Ron DeSantis will be the next president after Trump. Probably JD, but Vance is a very, very, it's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine offline about this, about the fact that DeSantis seems to have a really unique talent, and that is he is very good at manipulating the bureaucracy of the government. And in his case, it's a state government, but he's very good at it. I mean, he does stuff that other state governors can't seem to get away with, and that's because he understands the bureaucracy, what he's dealing with very, very closely. I could say Trump's learned that over his first term. In the last 8 years, Trump has now learned how to do this. And I don't know if DeSantis had this talent out of the box or if he learned it too, but he's very good at it. I mean, I think he would make a very effective president. I think J.D. Vance will probably end up getting the nod because Vance is so damn smart. But at any rate, I think that's what's going to happen. We're in for, I think, the start of at least 12 years of presidential Republican leadership, at least, and maybe longer. All right, I'm going to take another break here. We're going to run another commercial. When we go back, I'm going to talk about the UFO stuff again because that's what I do, folks. That's my thing.
The American people are ready to receive the truth.
Humanity is not the only intelligence in the universe.
Humanity is not the only intelligent species.
We are absolutely not alone.
Non-human intelligence exists.
UAPs are real, they're here, and they're not human. I spent 25 years as a senior official with the CIA.
I worked on highly classified UAP programs.
28 years as an astrophysicist.
I served as the 4th Director of National Intelligence.
Director of Aviation Security in the National Security Council.
A one-star admiral after 32 years of service.
People that come forward with this, I feel like they've taken their life in their own hands.
I was recruited to a highly sensitive government program that investigated unidentified aerial phenomenon.
For over 16 years, on behalf of the U.S. government, I worked as a senior intelligence official on the unidentified aerial phenomenon topic.
We learned that the U.S. government was involved in a long-running secret war with other nations to collect and reverse engineer vehicles not made by humans.
I have seen with my own eyes non-human craft and non-human beings.
So look at that thing. It's rotating. There's a whole fleet of them.
The first country that cracks the code on this technology will be the leader for years to come.
China has established its own version of a UAP task force.
You think for a second that they wouldn't consider using it to achieve their ends of domination?
This is similar to the Manhattan Project. This is the atomic weapon on steroids.
This is so secret. Very, very few people in our entire government have been allowed access to it.
Even presidents have been operating on a need-to-know basis. But that begins to ramp out of control.
It's not acceptable to have secret parts of government that no one ever sees.
You better be careful about a government that doesn't trust its people, because there's no telling what they'll pull on you.
This is the biggest discovery in human history.
You had information being locked away that could change the trajectory for species.
It has so many beneficial impacts, including clean energy.
We should have disclosure today. We should have disclosure tomorrow. The time has come.
What else you want to know?
That's the trailer for a new documentary called The Age of Disclosure. And it's going to be released at the South by Southwest Film Festival, which is the second week of March of this year. So I don't know what the exact release date is, but yeah, it's going to by the 14th of March. It will be released. This might be like the smoking gun of the entire thing, of the entire phenomena, because there's 34 government officials who say in this documentary that they have either seen the crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft and or seen the bodies. As a matter of fact, the guy who in the video you just saw in the trailer, who actually said, I have seen crashed spacecraft, I have seen non-human bodies. That's, if I'm right, that's Jay Stratton. And he was the former head of the UAP task force for the military. I don't know how Dan Farrar was the guy who produced this movie. I don't know how he got these people to talk about this on the record, but they did, or off the record or whatever, but they did talk about it. They're all identified. They're all current or former military or government personnel. A few of them, like Tim Burchett, are actual elected officials. Matter of fact, Burchett was on whose podcast was he on last week or something like that? This is the guy from the representative from Oklahoma, and he said that he knew for a fact that there was a underwater alien base off the coast of San Diego. That's been rumored for years, to the point where there's even weird radar readings from the bottom of the ocean in that area. That there's stuff on the bottom of it that looks like it's artificial, but he said he knows for a fact that that's true. This is a guy, I don't know why. There are people now who are coming out of the woodwork and saying stuff that I think formerly, and maybe even currently, would have gotten them arrested. But I don't know if the people are just throwing caution to the wind, or if it's because of the new disclosure laws. I mean, the thing that happened in 2023, was it, where they passed in the Defense Act, they passed a thing that said if you came forward as a UFO disclosure whistleblower, that you would not be prosecuted. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I don't. But anyway, this new film is coming out in March. 34 people from the government have said that, yeah, the UFOs they've been saying the same thing I've been saying for years. The UFOs are here, they're real, and yeah, we got little green men flying around. Now, I call them people because, first of all, they're, for lack of a better term, and also I read a lot of alien abduction reports. Now, and I have a friend of mine who thinks all this is complete, utter bullshit. He thinks it's all complete bunk. He says all these people are lying, all of them. I do not believe that, especially when you get to the part where there's literally hundreds of thousands of people in the United States who claim they've been abducted at this point, hundreds of thousands. So let's say 95% of them are either lying or misinterpreted something, right? They either had a dream or something like that, or they're just actually lying for attention. Well, that's the 5% that's left. What do you end up with? 10,000 people? Well, how do you explain that? And then here's the deal. Carl Sagan had the very famous quote, extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. Actually, that's wrong. Because here's the deal. If one single person can prove they were abducted by extraterrestrials, that means that the whole phenomenon exists. That's all you need. You need one. So the chances that every single person out of 200,000 are mistaken, and that's only in the United States, and worldwide, it appears to be millions. And then you're wondering, and I had a friend of mine, he said, he had a good point here. He said, why do you need to do it 5 million times? He said, why would you come here and abduct humans 5 million times in a row? What would be the point of that? Well, it turns out there maybe is a point. First of all, several of the abductees have said that it's really interesting. People get abducted, usually say that the beginning of the abduction is very, for lack of a better term, clinical. They're put on a bed in a hospital like room, and they have medical tests run on them. After they're done, though, he said that the aliens kind of warm up a little bit, and he said a lot of them either offer or will answer questions, and a lot of people ask questions, mostly where are you from? That's the two questions I've heard, the ask was, where are you from, and is God real? And believe it or not, this is a real amazing thing. This one guy said he talked to these aliens for 2 hours, and the only question they wouldn't answer is God real? And he said, I'm sorry. They said, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you about that. Everything else was fine. I find that kind of funny. I don't know, But all right, where was I going with this? What's the point I was trying to make? So you asked, when people are asked, like, why are they coming here? Well, the one answer a lot of them have said is that they have exhausted. They no longer have the ability to naturally reproduce, so they need DNA to spice up the gene pool, and that would mathematically and scientifically that would make sense. That would. There's another theory, and this is this is crazy, but it makes some sense too. There's a woman who said she's been abducted several times, and she claimed that the last time she was abducted, she said, so it's the usual thing. She's stuck on a slab. They're doing a medical test, and you do wonder, okay, I've done this 6 or 7 times in a row. What is the point? Well, she said this one time chaos erupted because apparently somebody broke into the spaceship and they were having a gunfight. And she said she actually heard what sounded more or less like gunfight going on. Now I don't know if there's laser gunfight or what the deal is, but she said, and then she said these other ETs walked into the room and they said, are you okay? They're talking to her. And of course, it's all telepathic. And the amazing thing is, when you speak telepathically, you can speak anybody's language. Because a lot of people have said that even the aliens who talk verbally apparently can speak perfect English. I don't know what the deal is with that. I sometimes wonder if they're being masked by an electronic device. If they're talking in one language and you hear another language because they're instantly being translated. I don't know. But she said they came into the room. She said, are you okay? And she said, yeah, what's going on? And she said, well, the little gray, this is what they told her. The little gray aliens were originally tasked with abducting humans for medical experiments, but somehow the whole program got off the rails, and the little gray aliens are basically biological robots, and their task, they were programmed to abduct humans and study them and do medical tests on them, and they didn't know how to stop. They said this ET told her, we've been trying to stop them. We don't no longer have any use for this, but they don't know how to stop. So we literally have to kill them. Because he said, we don't need the data anymore. This is all and so they let her go. Of course they let her go. And she said she hasn't been abducted since. And you stop and think about that. Well, that makes sense. That does. Now, could a normal, like some housewife from Philadelphia make that story up? I don't know. You tell me. It's like, that's crazy crap. That's what that is. But that does make sense. So in other words, all these people are being abducted. And my friend says, why do they need to do 5 million anal probes? And that's maybe because the people doing them literally don't know how to stop. That might be the reason. I don't know. It's crazy. I've told you that that for years in the UFO community, they've been saying that in 2027 or 2028, something major is going to happen, and it might end up being the disclosure after this movie comes out. There's a lot of people think it's going to happen this year, and a lot of people think Trump is going to do it. And Trump is a person to do it because he's a professional disruptor. I mean, he is. I'm going to end with this. So this is not UFO related. Getting back to the people in the government who are batshit crazy about the fact they might lose their jobs or get fired. And I can't remember who wrote this article. It might have been Ed Morrissey at Hot Air. I'm pulling this out. And if I mention Hot Air a lot, it's because I got a lot of friends who work there, and I think they do excellent work. And I have to tell you, it's my first stop on the news cycle every morning. I go to Hot Air first, because I those people I think Ed Morrissey and his crew there. He's a managing editor. They do great work, and I think maybe Ed wrote about this, about the fact that the problem with the deep state in Washington is that even the Republicans that don't like it, everyone's very comfortable with it. And people admit it hasn't basically, it's ineffective. It doesn't work. But the people there, they're very comfortable. They're comfortable in their jobs. Everyone gets paid. They don't want to see this end and here Trump comes around. He's really seems to be intent on disrupting and ending this whole thing. And either people are batshit crazy scared, or they're just mad. They don't want it to end. Even though, personally you don't want it to end, but these same people, according to the columnist who was writing, these same people will admit the fact that it's not working anymore, that the government is inefficient and incapable. But they're involved in it, and they live their day-to-day lives, and they don't want to see it end. And that makes sense. I suppose you don't. But like I said, get used to it. So it wouldn't surprise me that they were, that, and this columnist said that is the reason even a lot of Republicans don't like Trump, because he seems intent on disrupting and dismantling this whole thing, and the majority of the people involved with it don't want it dismantled because they're comfortable. Well, fuck you. That's what I have to say. I'm glad you're comfortable. I'm uncomfortable with what you're doing with my money. That's what I'm uncomfortable. If the government was actually run efficiently, I think our taxes could be 80% lower. Now, granted, we have a huge national debt we have to pay off, and we're never going to completely pay it off ever. I don't know how much of a dent we can make into it, but seriously, if we were only using 20% of the money we were using, and you put all that money to the national debt, my boyfriend Bill O'Reilly, he calculated, and supposedly they actually ran the figures, that if you take all of the license fees from the Alaska Oil Wildlife Reserve, what's called AMWR, I can't remember what that stands for, in Alaska, and you paid it directly to the national debt, he said we could pay off the national debt in 10 years. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what he says, and he says that his staff ran the figures, and that's from the licensing from one single region. It would probably not really impact the vast majority of the federal government budget at all. So I don't know, but Trump seems intent on doing this, and I'm all for it, and a lot of other people are for it too, because that seems to be the mandate he's been given. So, folks, that's our show for tonight. I want to thank you for watching. Now, next week, we got our new, you may have noticed we haven't had many guests on the last 2-3 weeks, and that's true. And we're kind of in a transition period here right now. Our Stephen Sullivan, our new producer, his primary job is going to be booking guests. So I'm assuming we're going to get back on track on that. We have our 200th show a week from tonight on Friday, and I'm going to try to make it a big blowout. Get some people on there, at least calling in, nothing else. So I don't know. We do not have guest roundup for Monday, so I don't know if that's going to happen. But we're getting back on the horse. So that's what's going on here. Once again, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. We'll be back on Monday. You folks have a nice weekend. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you, wherever you are. We'll see you on Monday. Take care, everyone.